My mom threatened to have me arrested for raising my own siblings. When I asked her why, she said, "Because you're just their brother. Know your place." I just stared at her. That was almost a year ago. Yesterday, she broke down sobbing in therapy when the doctor asked her Katie's best friend's name. He never cared about my parents, but he loved me. From the day he was born, my little brother Jamie's first word was my name, Theo, not my mom or my dad. My entire childhood revolved around taking care of my little bro. While everyone was saving up money to buy Beyblades, I was in the grocery store buying Go-Gurt for my little brother's lunches. I loved every minute of it. Seeing the faces on Jamie and my little sister Katie's face when I made them their lunches was the most rewarding thing in the world to me. According to our parents, they had more things to do. Our mom discovered her passion for multi-level marketing schemes where she sold knives ever since Jamie was still in the womb. Dad loved his job because his secretary Rebecca was always on top of him, and they took a lot of secret work trips together. But honestly, I preferred it that way because it forced me to do things I wouldn't have done otherwise. Every time my parents forgot a parent-teacher conference or Katie's dance recital, I got to be there instead. I got to be the reason their faces lit up. I opened a savings account the day I turned 16 and deposited every dollar from my part-time job, knowing we'd need it when mom inevitably drained the grocery budget on another failed business venture. And for a while, our system worked perfectly. I'd wake up at 5:30 to pack lunches and check homework while our parents slept off their hangovers. The kids never went hungry, never missed an assignment, never felt unloved, and to me, that was all that mattered. But at Jamie's high school graduation, something insane happened. Me and my family all attended together. Mom even wore something other than yoga pants, and Dad left his phone in his pocket for a full 10 minutes. They sat in the front row like they'd earned those seats, posting photos with captions about their brilliant son. When he walked across the stage, tears were streaming down my face. I felt like I was watching my own child grow up. And 5,000 name calls later, it was finally time to leave, or so I thought, because that's when Jamie got up on stage to give a speech. "This speech isn't about me," he started. "It's about the person who made sure I'd be standing here today. He found me in the crowd, and we locked eyes. I wiped my tears away out of embarrassment. When I was 6, I broke my arm falling off the monkey bars. The person who rushed me to the hospital was my brother Theo, who was only 13, and had to convince the nurses he was old enough to sign the paperwork. The auditorium fell silent. Even the rustling of programs stopped. Most kids learn to ride bikes with their parents. I learned in an empty parking lot at 6 a.m. because Theo worked nights to buy me that bike, and early morning was the only time he had free. Mom's phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the floor. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. "So Mom and Dad," Jamie said in a gentle, lighthearted tone, "thank you for giving me the best role model I could ask for." He raised his diploma toward me. "This is yours as much as mine, Theo. Actually, it's more yours. Because while you were raising us, you gave up your own chance at being a kid." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Our extended family members were turning to stare at my parents. Aunt Helen's mouth had fallen open. Uncle Robert was shaking his head slowly, connecting dots from years of missed family gatherings. The applause started slowly, then built to thunder. After the ceremony, our relatives swarmed us. Not our parents, just us. Grandma grabbed my face in her weathered hands, sobbing apologies for not realizing sooner. "We thought you were just being a helpful big brother," she wept. My parents fled before the reception ended, their carefully maintained image shattered beyond repair. But they weren't done with me. 48 hours later, I was helping Katie practice for her dance recital when the doorbell rang. 2 women in pink suits stood on my porch, CPS badges glinting in the afternoon sun. My blood turned to ice water. They pushed past me like I wasn't even there, documenting everything with phones and notepads. The medication chart I'd created to track Jamie's ADHD prescriptions became evidence of unauthorized medical decisions. The birthday calendar with everyone's doctor's appointments was assuming parental authority without legal standing. Even the fully stocked refrigerator was somehow twisted into overcompensation for neglect. And suddenly, everything made sense. Because as they made calls about emergency placement orders, the woman said, "Yes, the biological parents called in the report. They're willing to resume full custody immediately." The CPS workers split up, one heading upstairs while the other cornered Katie in the living room. I watched helplessly as they asked her question after question about our daily routines. Katie, sweet and trusting, answered everything honestly. She told them how I made her breakfast every morning, how I signed her permission slips, how I picked her up from dance practice. Each innocent answer twisted into another mark against me in their notebooks. Jamie came through the front door, backpack slung over one shoulder, and froze at the scene. The CPS worker immediately redirected her attention to him, asking about his graduation speech. His face went pale as she suggested someone might have coached him to say those things, that maybe he felt pressured to embarrass his parents in public. I saw the confusion flash across his face before anger replaced it. The pieces clicked together in my mind like a horrible puzzle. Our parents had weaponized my love for my siblings. Every act of care, every moment I'd stepped up when they'd stepped back, was now evidence of me overstepping boundaries. They'd turned protection into prosecution. The lead CPS worker gathered her papers and delivered the blow. We had 72 hours until an emergency custody hearing. Unless I could prove I had legal standing as their caregiver, Katie and Jamie would be placed with our parents immediately. The words hit me like physical punches. Legal standing. I'd been their parent in every way that mattered for years, but on paper, I was just their brother. My phone started buzzing immediately. Word travels fast in our neighborhood, and soon Aunt Helen was calling, then Uncle Robert, then cousins I hadn't heard from in months. The gossip mill was churning, and everyone wanted to know if it was true that CPS had shown up at our house. Grandma arrived within the hour, her face etched with worry. She pulled me aside while the kids did homework upstairs, keeping their routine as normal as possible despite the chaos. She offered to help however she could, but warned me that family courts almost always sided with biological parents. The system didn't care who'd actually raised the children, only who'd given birth to them. Our parents' car pulled into the driveway just as Grandma was leaving. They walked in like they owned the place, which technically they did, wearing matching expressions of concern. Mom rushed to the kitchen and actually started cooking dinner, something she hadn't done in months. The smell of garlic and onions felt foreign in our kitchen. Dad sat down with Jamie to help with homework, his phone nowhere in sight for once. The performance was flawless. They knew exactly what they were doing, creating a paper trail of sudden parental involvement. Every interaction was staged for maximum impact, preparing evidence for the custody hearing. When Katie came downstairs, Mom swept her into a hug that made my sister stiffen with surprise. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, my parents cornered me in the hallway. Their masks dropped completely. They made it clear that if I fought the custody transfer, they'd file criminal charges. The word kidnapping hung in the air between us like a threat. They'd thought of everything, planned every angle. My protection had become a weapon they could use against me. I spent the rest of the night researching lawyers. Grandma had given me a name, someone who specialized in family law. The consultation was sobering. Siblings had almost no rights in these situations unless the parents could be proven unfit. Being absent wasn't enough. Being neglectful wasn't enough. The bar was set impossibly high, and my parents were already working to clear it with their sudden burst of parenting theater. The next morning started their new routine. Mom was up making breakfast breakfast. Badly. The eggs were runny, the toast burnt, but she served it with a smile while Dad asked about everyone's plans for the day. Neither of them knew Katie had dance practice, or that Jamie needed his medication refilled. They were playing house with children they barely knew. I started documenting everything. Every missed appointment they didn't know about. Every medication schedule they couldn't remember. Every routine they disrupted. But even as I gathered evidence, they were creating their own. Mom signed up for the PTA. Dad scheduled parent-teacher conferences. They were rewriting history in real time. The manipulation reached new levels when I overheard them coaching Katie. They were in her room, telling her how much happier she'd be living with Mommy and Daddy full-time. They painted pictures of family vacations we all knew would never happen, promised attention they'd never given. Katie's confused responses broke my heart. She didn't understand why she was being asked to lie about what she wanted. When Katie started crying, our parents had their next piece of evidence. They claimed her distress proved I'd psychologically manipulated her against them. Every genuine emotion, every authentic bond I'd built with my siblings over years of actual parenting was being twisted into proof of inappropriate control. The truth didn't matter anymore, only the narrative they were building. Extended family members began showing up throughout the week. Aunt Helen brought casseroles. Uncle Robert stopped by to fix a leaky faucet. Our cousins suddenly remembered we existed. Everyone wanted to witness our parents' transformation firsthand. The house felt like a stage, and we were all unwilling actors in their performance. Mom and Dad played their parts perfectly when family was around. They asked about school projects they'd never cared about before. They sat through Katie's dance practice video on repeat, commenting enthusiastically each time. They helped Jamie organize his college applications, despite not knowing what schools he was interested in or what he wanted to study. Every interaction was calculated for maximum witness impact. The 72 hours passed in a blur of legal preparation and parental performance art. Our parents had assembled an impressive array of false evidence, forged signatures on old permission slips, backdated calendar entries showing their involvement in school events, even staged photos from activities they'd never attended. They'd been planning this for longer than just since Jamie's graduation speech. By the time the emergency custody hearing approached, I felt like I was drowning. Every truth I knew about our family was being rewritten. Every sacrifice I'd made was being reframed as selfish control. Every moment of love I'd shown my siblings was being twisted into something sinister, but I couldn't give up. Not when Katie still crawled into my bed after nightmares. Not when Jamie still looked to me for guidance. Not when I was the only parent they'd ever really known. The extended family was divided. Some saw through our parents' act, remembering years of absence and neglect. Others bought into the performance, choosing to believe that blood trumped everything else. The battle lines were drawn, and my siblings were caught in the middle, confused and scared by the sudden upheaval in their lives. As we prepared for the hearing, I held on to one truth. Love wasn't just biology. It was showing up every day, knowing their favorite foods, remembering their fears, celebrating their victories. It was being there when they were sick, scared, or struggling. It was choosing them over and over again, even when it meant sacrificing everything else. Our parents might share their DNA, but I'd shared their lives, and somehow, I had to make the court see that difference. The morning of the hearing arrived with an unseasonable chill that matched the ice in my stomach. I dressed carefully in the only suit I owned, the one I'd bought for job interviews, while listening to Mom and Dad rehearse their testimonies downstairs. Their voices carried through the thin walls as they practiced sounding devastated about their children's supposed alienation from them. Katie appeared in my doorway, her dance outfit in hand. She'd insisted on bringing it to the courthouse, convinced that somehow the hearing would end in time for her recital that evening. I helped her pack it carefully in her backpack, both of us pretending this was just another normal day where I'd make sure she got where she needed to be. Jamie emerged from his room looking older than his 18 years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from a week of disrupted sleep. His ADHD medication sat untouched on his dresser because our parents had forbidden me from managing his prescriptions anymore. The resulting chaos in his mind showed in his trembling hands and unfocused gaze. The courthouse loomed gray and imposing against the morning sky. Our parents arrived separately in their nicest clothes, projecting an image of responsible adults who'd simply been trying to reconnect with children stolen from them by an overbearing sibling. They'd even hired a professional photographer to document their arrival, creating more evidence of their supposed dedication. Inside the family court waiting area, the divide was visible. Aunt Helen and Uncle Robert sat firmly on our side of the room, their faces set with determination. Grandma clutched her purse like a weapon, ready to fight for us however she could. But several cousins and family friends had gravitated toward our parents, swayed by their performance of reformed caregivers. My lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Catherine who'd seen too many family disasters, reviewed our evidence one final time. Birth certificates, school records, medical documents, years of proof that I'd been the one showing up. But she warned me again that paperwork rarely trumped biology in family court. The courtroom itself felt smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the grand halls of justice from TV shows. Judge Kathy Benjamin presided with an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind before hearing a word of testimony. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, ready to document the destruction of our family. Our parents' lawyer painted a picture of devoted parents whose attempts to provide for their family had been misunderstood. Mom's MLM ventures became entrepreneurial spirit. Dad's absences became necessary sacrifice for financial stability. They'd crafted a narrative where their neglect was reframed as tough love, preparing their children for independence. When Mom took the stand, she cried on cue. She spoke about the pain of watching her eldest son turn her babies against her, how she tried so hard to be involved but I'd pushed her away at every turn. The performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with trembling lips and perfectly timed tears. Dad's testimony focused on how I'd undermined his authority as the man of the house. He claimed I deliberately scheduled the children's activities during his work hours to exclude him. The fact that he'd never known their schedules in the first place was conveniently omitted from his version of events. The CPS workers presented their findings with clinical detachment. They'd observed a household where parental roles were confused, where a sibling had assumed inappropriate levels of responsibility. Their recommendation was clear. The children should be returned to their biological parents immediately, with supervised visits from me to ease the transition. During a brief recess, I found Jamie in the bathroom, splashing water on his face. His medication withdrawal was getting worse, making his thoughts scatter like startled birds. He grabbed my arm with desperate strength, begging me not to let them take him and Katie. I promised him I'd fight with everything I had, even as I felt the case slipping away. Back in the courtroom, Catherine called our witnesses. Aunt Helen testified about years of holiday dinners where I'd been the one making sure the kids were fed while our parents socialized. Uncle Robert described driving Katie to dance classes because I couldn't drive yet and our parents were always busy. Their words painted the real picture of our family, but I could see the judge's skepticism. Grandma's testimony was the most powerful. She spoke about finding me doing laundry at age 10 because Mom was passed out from a wine tasting party for her latest business venture. She described described birthday parties where I'd bake the cakes because our parents forgot. Her voice cracked as she admitted she should have intervened sooner, but had believed keeping the family together was more important than acknowledging the dysfunction. The judge ordered a brief psychological evaluation of the children, to be conducted immediately by the court psychologist. This wasn't standard procedure, but something in Grandma's testimony had sparked a flicker of doubt about the neat narrative our parents had presented. I waited in the hallway while Katie was interviewed first. Through the door, I could hear her small voice trying to explain why she felt safer with me than with Mommy and Daddy. The psychologist's questions were gentle but probing, designed to detect coaching or manipulation. Jamie's interview was harder to listen to. Without his medication, his thoughts tumbled out in a chaotic stream. He talked about the morning routines I'd established that helped him function, the systems I'd created to help him manage his ADHD. He described our parents' recent attempts at involvement as scary and confusing, like strangers suddenly claiming ownership of his life. While we waited for the psychologist's report, our parents made their next move. They announced they'd enrolled in parenting classes, showing certificates of completion dated suspiciously close to when they'd first called CPS. They produced character references from neighbors who'd never actually seen them interact with their children, but were happy to sign supportive statements. The psychologist's preliminary findings were mixed. While both children showed strong attachment to me, the court couldn't ignore the biological relationship. The recommendation was for a gradual transition, with the children spending increasing time with our parents, while I was slowly phased out of their daily lives. Catherine argued passionately that this would traumatize Katie and Jamie, but the judge seemed unmoved. The law was clear. Absent evidence of abuse or severe neglect, biological parents retained primary rights. The fact that I'd been the one raising them was touching, but legally irrelevant. As the hearing progressed, our parents' mask began slipping. When questioned about Jamie's medication schedule, Mom fumbled the dosage and timing. When asked about Katie's dance teacher's name, Dad drew a blank. These small failures accumulated, but would they be enough? During another recess, I overheard our parents in the hallway. They were discussing their plans to move the children to Mom's sister's house in another state, where they could start fresh without the interference of extended family. The conversation confirmed my worst fears. They didn't want to parent Katie and Jamie, they wanted to win. I alerted Catherine immediately, but without a recording, it was my word against theirs. She advised me to remain calm, that any emotional outburst would be used as evidence of instability. So I sat quietly as my family's future was debated by strangers who'd never seen Katie's face light up at a perfect pirouette or helped Jamie through a panic attack. The judge ordered a more comprehensive family assessment, frustrated by the conflicting testimonies. This meant another delay, another period of limbo where our parents could continue their performance while my siblings suffered the uncertainty. But it also meant another chance to prove the truth of our situation. Over the following weeks, the court-appointed assessor became a regular fixture in our home. She observed meal times where our parents struggled to remember who liked what foods. She watched homework sessions where they couldn't help with basic assignments. She documented the children's increasing anxiety as their routines continued to crumble. Our parents responded by escalating their control. They installed cameras in the common areas, claiming it was for the children's safety, but really monitoring my every interaction with Katie and Jamie. They instituted a rule that I couldn't be alone with either sibling, forcing all our conversations to happen under their suspicious gaze. The strain began showing on Katie first. Her dancing, always a source of joy and expression, became mechanical and lifeless. She stopped eating properly, pushing food around her plate at dinners where our parents forced conversation about topics they knew nothing about. Her teacher called, concerned about the sudden change in her most dedicated student. Jamie's situation deteriorated faster. Without consistent medication management, his grades plummeted. He missed assignment deadlines, forgot about tests, and struggled to focus even on subjects he loved. Our parents' solution was to ground him for poor performance, not understanding that punishment wouldn't fix a medical condition they refused to properly manage. I documented everything meticulously, every missed medication dose, every forgotten appointment, every sign of the children's declining well-being. But I had to be careful. Our parents were watching for any sign that I was undermining their authority, ready to use it as ammunition in court. The extended family began choosing sides more firmly. Aunt Helen started visiting daily, ostensibly to help, but really to monitor our parents' behavior. She brought groceries when Mom forgot to shop, reminded Dad about school events he'd never remember otherwise. Her presence was a lifeline, but it also agitated our parents. Uncle Robert took a different approach. He offered our parents money, suggesting they might be too financially stressed to properly care for the children. The offer was rejected with indignation, but it revealed something important. This wasn't about money or resources. It was about control and image. One evening, I found Katie crying in her room. She'd overheard our parents discussing boarding schools, places where she and Jamie could get excellent education while they focused on rebuilding their lives. The casualness with which they discussed shipping their children away confirmed what I'd always known. We were accessories to them, not family. The comprehensive assessment continued for weeks. The social worker interviewed teachers, coaches, neighbors, anyone who'd observed our family dynamics. Slowly, a pattern emerged that even the most biased observer couldn't ignore. In every aspect of the children's lives, I was the constant while our parents were shadows. But our parents had one more card to play. They filed a police report claiming I'd been emotionally abusing the children, turning them against their rightful guardians. The accusation was baseless, but required investigation. Suddenly, I was not just fighting for custody, but defending myself against criminal allegations. The police interviews were grueling. They questioned every decision I'd made, every boundary I'd crossed in caring for my siblings. Had I overstepped by signing permission slips? Was making medical decisions abuse of assumed authority? The questions made me doubt myself even as I knew I'd only done what was necessary. Katie and Jamie were interviewed separately by specialists trained in detecting abuse. Their consistent stories of love and care should have ended the investigation immediately, but our parents kept pushing, claiming the children were too traumatized to recognize the manipulation they'd suffered. The investigation's expansion meant more delays. Katie's dance recital came and went without her participation because our parents didn't think it was important enough to prioritize during such a stressful time. Jamie missed his college application deadlines because no one but me had been tracking them, and I was forbidden from helping. Grandma tried to intervene more directly, offering to take temporary custody of all three of us. The suggestion sent our parents into a rage. They accused her of conspiring with me, of being part of the systematic alienation of their children. The woman who'd raised them was suddenly an enemy to be defeated. The psychological evaluation of our parents revealed what we'd all known. They had no real understanding of their children's needs, personalities, or daily lives. They couldn't name Katie's best friend or Jamie's favorite subject. They didn't know about Katie's pre-performance rituals or Jamie's coping mechanisms for overwhelming situations. But the evaluation also revealed something unexpected. Our parents genuinely believed their version of events. In their minds, they'd been devoted parents whose children had been stolen by an overreaching sibling. The delusion was so complete that they passed psychological tests for honesty. They weren't lying. They'd rewritten history in their own minds. This revelation complicated everything. Judges were more likely to side with parents who seemed sincere, even if sincerely wrong, than with siblings who appeared to be undermining parental authority. Catherine warned me that we were losing ground, that the court might order immediate transfer of custody, despite all evidence to the contrary. In desperation, I reached out to an old family friend who worked in social services in another county. She couldn't intervene directly, but offered advice. Document everything, she said, but also prepare for the worst. Have plans in place for maintaining contact with the children if custody was transferred. Build a support network that could monitor their well-being from afar. The thought of losing them made me physically ill. I'd spent over a decade being their protector, their constant, their real parent. The idea of watching from the sidelines while they suffered under our parents' neglect was unbearable, but I had to be strategic, not emotional. I began reaching out to every possible ally. Katie's dance teacher agreed to keep an eye on her, to be a safe adult she could turn to. Jamie's school counselor promised to monitor his academic and emotional state. Aunt Helen and Uncle Robert created a schedule to ensure someone was checking on the children regularly. Our parents noticed the network forming and responded predictably. They accused me of creating a spy network, of continuing my campaign of alienation, even as the court proceedings proved their fitness as parents. Every act of care was twisted into evidence of pathology. The final assessment report was due any day. Catherine prepared me for both outcomes, but her tone suggested she expected the worst. The system's bias toward biological parents was strong, and our parents had successfully painted themselves as victims of a disturbed young adult's control issues. I spent what might be my last normal evening with my siblings, helping Katie practice a dance routine in the garage, and quizzing Jamie for a history test. We didn't talk about the looming decision. We just existed in our familiar rhythm, the one I'd created and maintained through years of necessity. That night, I lay awake planning. If the court gave our parents custody, I'd respect the legal decision but never stop fighting for Katie and Jamie's well-being. I'd document every instance of neglect, build an ironclad case for the future. They might win this battle, but I'd make sure it wasn't the end of the war. The assessment report arrived the morning of the final hearing. Catherine's face as she read it told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. The social worker had concluded that while I'd provided exemplary care, the children belonged with their biological parents. The recommendation included a transition plan and family therapy to repair the damaged relationships, but buried in the report was a lifeline. The assessor noted serious concerns about the parents' ability to meet the children's medical and educational needs. She recommended continued involvement from extended family and regular check-ins from social services. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't complete defeat either. As we prepared to enter the courthouse for what would likely be the final hearing, Jamie grabbed my hand. His grip was steady despite everything, reminding me that the bonds we'd built over years couldn't be severed by a court order. Katie stood on my other side, her dance bag still optimistically packed, ready to perform if given the chance. Our parents arrived looking triumphant, already planning their new life with children they didn't know how to parent. They'd won the legal battle, but the real fight, the one for Katie and Jamie's actual well-being, was just beginning, and I'd be ready for every round. The final hearing stretched into the afternoon as our parents' lawyer presented their closing arguments. I watched Judge Benjamin's face for any sign of sympathy, but her expression remained neutral as she reviewed the mountain of evidence. Catherine squeezed my shoulder when the judge announced she'd reached a decision. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Benjamin began reading her ruling. She acknowledged the unusual circumstances, the clear evidence that I'd been the primary caregiver for years, but the law was clear about biological parents' rights. My heart sank with each word until she reached the unexpected twist in her decision. While custody would remain with our parents, the judge imposed strict conditions: weekly check-ins with social services, mandatory family therapy sessions. Most importantly, she granted me official visitation rights and the authority to participate in medical and educational decisions. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was more than Catherine had expected. Our parents' faces showed their fury at the restrictions, but they forced smiles for the court photographer they'd hired. The judge dismissed us with a warning that any violation of the custody order would result in immediate review. As we filed out, I noticed Mom's hands shaking as she realized their victory came with chains. Back home, the reality hit immediately. Our parents had to actually parent now, under constant supervision. Within hours, they discovered what I'd always known. Jamie's medication schedule wasn't just pills at random times. It required careful timing with meals, monitoring for side effects, and adjusting doses based on his stress levels. Katie's dance schedule proved equally challenging. She didn't just need rides to practice. She needed specific pre-performance meals, the right hair accessories, and someone who understood her anxiety patterns. Mom's attempts to French braid Katie's hair ended in tears and tangled disasters. The first family therapy session revealed the depth of our parents' delusions. The therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Martinez, cut through their performance within minutes. She asked simple questions about the children's lives that they couldn't answer. What was Jamie's favorite subject? Who was Katie's best friend? The silence spoke volumes. I attended the sessions as required, watching our parents squirm under professional scrutiny. Dr. Martinez didn't let them deflect or blame. She forced them to confront their absence, their neglect, their choice to prioritize everything except their children. For the first time, they couldn't retreat into their fantasy of being misunderstood parents. The social services check-ins became our parents' worst nightmare. The caseworker arrived unannounced, documenting the chaos. Expired food in the refrigerator because Mom forgot to shop. Jamie's missed medication doses because Dad couldn't remember the schedule. Katie's unwashed dance clothes because laundry wasn't a priority. Within 2 weeks, cracks appeared in their united front. Mom started drinking more, unable to cope with the constant demands of actual parenting. Dad began working late again, finding excuses to avoid the homework battles and bedtime routines. They'd wanted to win, not to parent. Jamie's grades continued falling without proper medication management. His teachers called repeatedly, concerned about his declining performance. Our parents' solution was to blame the school, the teachers, even Jamie himself. They couldn't accept that parenting required more than just being present. Katie withdrew into herself, her vibrant personality dimming under our parents' inconsistent attention. She stopped practicing her routines at home, claiming she didn't feel like dancing anymore. Her teacher called me directly, violating the custody order but desperate to help her star student. The extended family network we built proved invaluable. Aunt Helen, accidentally, showed up during medication times, ensuring Jamie got his doses. Uncle Robert offered to drive Katie to practice when our parents forgot. Grandma brought groceries and cooked meals, maintaining some stability in the chaos. Our parents resented every intervention, but they couldn't refuse without admitting their incompetence. They were trapped in their own victory, forced to maintain the facade of caring parents while drowning in the reality of what that meant. 3 months in, the situation exploded. Jamie had a major ADHD crisis during a test, unable to focus without proper medication management. The school called an emergency meeting, threatening to involve additional authorities if his medical needs weren't met. Our parents sat silent as educators explained what I'd always known about his condition. That night, I found Jamie in the garage, organizing tools obsessively to calm his scattered mind. He didn't speak, but his eyes begged for help. I couldn't legally give him his medication, but I could sit with him, teaching him coping techniques I'd learned through years of research. Katie's dance recital hospital approached with our parents clueless about preparations. They didn't know she needed to arrive 2 hours early, that she required specific snacks for energy, that her costume needed particular undergarments. Their fumbling attempts to help only increased her anxiety. The morning of the recital, Katie appeared at my door at 5 a.m., fully dressed but with tangled hair and smudged makeup. I spent an hour fixing what our parents had attempted, careful not to violate the custody order while ensuring she could perform with confidence. At the recital, our parents sat in the audience like cardboard cutouts. They clapped at the wrong moments, took flash photography despite repeated warnings, and left immediately after Katie's number without watching her receive her award. I stayed, cheering loud enough for all of us. Dr. Martinez called an emergency session after the recital disaster. She didn't mince words about our parents' failure to meet basic parenting standards. For the first time, Mom broke down genuinely, admitting she didn't know how to be a mother. Dad remained defensive, but cracks showed in his armor. The admission changed nothing immediately, but it opened a door. Dr. Martinez suggested intensive parenting classes, not the perfunctory ones they'd taken before. Real education about child development, ADHD management, and emotional support. Our parents agreed reluctantly, seeing no alternative. Meanwhile, I used every legal visitation hour to maintain stability for my siblings. I helped with homework, managed medication schedules within legal boundaries, and provided the emotional support our parents couldn't. The restrictions chafed, but they were better than complete separation. 6 months into the new arrangement, our parents made a shocking announcement: they were separating. The stress of actual parenting had shattered their already fragile relationship. Mom blamed Dad for the situation. Dad accused Mom of weakness. Neither accepted responsibility for their children's needs. The separation complicated custody further. Neither parent wanted sole responsibility for the children. They began negotiating who would take which days, treating Katie and Jamie like possessions to be divided. The children's anxiety skyrocketed as their lives became even more unstable. During a particularly heated exchange, Dad made a revealing comment about moving out of state for a fresh start. The casualness with which he discussed abandoning his children confirmed what I'd suspected. Given the chance, he'd disappear entirely. Mom wasn't much better. She talked about finding herself and needing space to heal. The children were obstacles to her self-discovery, burdens she'd never wanted to carry. The performance of devoted parenthood crumbled completely. Dr. Martinez documented everything meticulously: the failed medication management, the missed appointments, the emotional neglect disguised as parental rights. Her reports to the court painted a devastating picture of parents who'd won custody but lost interest in parenting. The breaking point came when Jamie was hospitalized after a severe ADHD medication interaction. Our parents had mixed up his doses, giving him double one day and nothing the next. His system crashed, leaving him disoriented and physically ill. The hospital called me as his emergency contact, a violation of the custody order our parents had forgotten to update. I spent 18 hours by his bedside while our parents arrived separately, argued about whose fault it was, and left without resolving anything. The nurses documented their behavior, adding to the growing evidence of neglect. Jamie squeezed my hand weakly, whispering apologies for causing trouble. Katie found me in the hospital cafeteria at 3 a.m. She'd taken 3 buses alone to get there, terrified for her brother. At 13, she was navigating public transportation at night because our parents couldn't be bothered to drive her. We sat together, sharing vending machine snacks and pretending everything would be okay. The hospital social worker filed a report that triggered immediate court review. The medical neglect was undeniable. Jamie could have died from the medication mismanagement. The judge who'd granted our parents custody faced the consequences of her decision. Catherine worked tirelessly preparing for the emergency hearing. This time, we had documented proof of neglect, not just absence. Medical records, therapy notes, social services reports, and witness statements painted an undeniable picture. Our parents had been given every opportunity and failed spectacularly. The emergency hearing was different from the first. Judge Benjamin's neutrality cracked as she reviewed Jamie's hospital records. She questioned our parents directly about medication schedules, and their fumbling responses revealed their dangerous incompetence. Mom cried again, but the tears rang hollow now. Our parents' lawyer attempted damage control, arguing for continued custody with additional support. But when questioned about specific support needs, neither parent could articulate what help they required. They didn't know enough about their children's needs to even ask for appropriate assistance. The guardian ad litem appointed to represent the children's interests delivered devastating testimony. Both children had explicitly stated they wanted to live with me. They felt unsafe with their biological parents, not from abuse, but from incompetence. The system designed to protect them had failed. Judge Benjamin ordered immediate temporary custody transfer to me while a full investigation proceeded. Our parents protested weakly, but relief flickered in their eyes. They were exhausted from 6 months of pretending to parent. The performance had drained them completely. The ride home from court felt surreal. Katie sat in the back, clutching her dance bag like a lifeline. Jamie stared out the window, medication schedule properly managed for the first time in months. We didn't celebrate, we just breathed, feeling safety returned to our family. The next months involved extensive legal procedures, home studies, background checks, financial evaluations. I submitted to every requirement gladly, knowing each step brought us closer to permanent stability. Catherine guided us through the maze of paperwork with determination. Our parents' involvement dwindled to nothing. They missed supervised visitation appointments, forgot to call on birthdays, and eventually stopped pretending to care. Their lawyer filed paperwork indicating they wouldn't contest permanent guardianship transfer. They'd rather lose their children than admit failure. The final guardianship hearing was anticlimactic. Our parents didn't attend. Their lawyer submitted a brief statement about recognizing the children's best interests. Judge Benjamin granted me full legal guardianship with a sharp comment about biological parents who abandon their responsibilities. Katie performed at her next recital with confidence, knowing I'd be in the audience. Jamie started college with proper ADHD management and academic support. We built new routines around school, dance, medication, and family dinners. Normal felt extraordinary after years of chaos. Grandma moved closer to help with daily logistics. Aunt Helen and Uncle Robert remained constant presences, providing the extended family support every child needs. We created stability through choice and commitment, not biology. Our parents sent a card at Christmas, signed but without personal messages. We displayed it briefly, then moved forward. Years later, when people asked about our family, I kept explanations simple. I was raising my siblings. The details mattered less than the reality we built together. Love wasn't about DNA or legal documents. It was about showing up every day, especially when it was hard. We'd learned that lesson through pain, but we'd learned it absolutely.